Hey everyone, welcome back to Mishey Cat Yoga. It's me, your Mishey Cat. In this episode today, we're going to be diving into the anatomy of yoga. So there's lots to be covered here. There's lots of different names. A lot of things that are hard to pronounce, hard to say. So we're going to keep it pretty simple here, focusing on just a few key words that you might hear often throughout your yoga class, or maybe throughout a fitness class. And maybe if you don't hear these words used in your classes, maybe to yourself while you're doing the exercise and finding yourself in different movements, you can kind of label those movements in your head from the anatomy aspect instead of just saying in and out, up or down. So we won't really need anything to practice today. Just yourself, maybe take some notes if you'd like. We are going to only really be in possibly a few poses, somewhere you can just have enough space to stand, if that feels good for you. So get yourself ready and I'll see you in a moment. So something about yoga that has been so profound to me, and it's just so important, I believe, that demonstrates the universal and the totality of this practice, just connecting not only to yourself, to others, and to yourself, to your spirit, to your soul. Using yoga in the asana form, we really stimulate so many different systems of our body. A couple key important ones that yoga really targets are our respiratory system. We use that a lot when we are breathing. Our pranayama is a heavy part of our yoga practice. Getting all of that fresh air, that fresh oxygen into each cell. So it helps our respiratory system, our digestive system as well. A lot of poses even are named after this digestive movement, wind relieving pose. A lot of the twists are detoxifying our digestive system and getting that jump started. Another system this works with is our nervous system. In the last video, we spoke about our symptomatic nervous and our parasympathetic nervous system, that fight and flight or that rest and digest. So yoga helps stimulate us into that more calming nervous system. So we've got our respiratory, our digestive, our nervous system. It also helps with our circulatory system, getting all of that oxygen and all of that blood pumping through all of the limbs. We are moving around also with our breath. Two more systems that yoga helps with is our muscular system. Of course, whenever we find ourselves in a nice, strong warrior pose, we're feeling those muscles engaged. Maybe it's our Utkatasana, our fierce chair pose, where we really feel those muscles light up and we feel them being used. One last system that our yoga practice aids in is our skeletal system. Our skeletal system is so important. It's an integral part of our body. We notice that it's a lot easier to stand when the bones are stacked on top of each other. A lot of the times, and especially in my yoga practice, I like to find myself in that Tadasana, that mountain pose where you're just standing nice and tall. And it's super easy to stand with your head stacked over your shoulders, stacked over your hips, stacked over your feet. When those bones stack, they give us a little bit of more power. Our bones support the weight of our body. The muscles move the bones, so both are equally important. A few anatomy words that we are going to practice today, just a couple different sets of terms that we'll be going through today. The first one's going to be the sagittal plane and the axis plane. The axis is also known as the horizontal or the transverse plane. The sagittal plane, longitudinal plane. So thinking that word longitude means up and down, right? Same kind of thing with that sagittal plane. It's going to divide the body right in half between the left and the right side. A lot of the anatomy is used in these planes of lines of planes of the body, that median line. Maybe we hear that word, the median, all the time, speaking about that line that's going straight down the middle of our body, in reference to bringing your arms or legs farther or closer away from those areas. The axial plane, the horizontal, or the transverse plane is going to be when we divide the body right in half. Just not cutting your body, but finding that line right in half, dividing the upper and the lower regions of the body. So one of the main systems that's going to be in that median line, that sagittal plane, is of course our spine. Our spine holding those capacity of the nervous system. Our spine also can move different directions. It can find that flexion, which is moving forward. It can find extension, leaning backwards. It can find lateral movements side to side. And it can find axial movements twisting. Notice that twist is coming from that axial plane, that line that divides the body in half. So our spine also holds some very important energy centers. The length of our spine holds our Sushumna Nadi, that energy center, traveling all of that prana and life force energy up and down our spine. On the left side, we have our Ida, which is representative of a more feminine, lunar, softer, cooler side. On the right side, we have our Pingala, which is representative of our masculine energy, the sun, more heat. Our spine is also broken up into 4 different sections. The first part of the spine, very, very base of the head all the way down to the shoulders, that neck region, is going to be our cervical spine. The cervical spine is fully formed when we are around 9 months old. The next section from the shoulders down to kind of the middle of the back, that is our thoracic spine. We're really able to find our twist movements from the cervical and thoracic area. The third section, a little bit lower into the lower back region, is our lumbar. Fun fact, only humans have the lumbar spine, that lumbar curve. It begins to form whenever we are starting to walk around 12 to 18 months old. It's more of a visible curvature of the spine when we become around 6 years old. By the time we are 10 years old, it is fully developed. The lower part of the spine, called our sacral, really close to that sacral chakra. They're in the same region. So those are just a few areas of the spine to consider. There are 2 Sanskrit words here to describe easiness, soft, and comfort, and another one to describe strength. The Sthira is our strong, our strength. And the Sukha is a little bit more ease, a little more open. These 2 Sanskrit words also can be used to describe our spine. The Sthira and the Sukha, the Sthira being the hard vertebrae that connects all the way up the spine. The Sukha to describe the discs and ligaments that are in between those hard bones that are soft, elastic, and to help absorb some of the pressure. So that's why at night when we are sleeping and we're usually laying flat, laying horizontal, where there's no pressure on the spine. So all of those discs and ligaments can replenish, rehydrate, and expand. So when we wake up in the morning, that's why we're a little bit taller. Throughout the day, gravity presses on the spine, shortening it just a little bit. So that's why when our yoga practice, when we do some decompression of the spine, or maybe we're hanging on some monkey bars, that also helps decompress the spine a little bit. And that's probably why it feels so good. A few other words that we're going to go over today: flexion and extension. Flexion is an inward movement towards that sagittal plane. Extension is moving away from the sagittal plane. So we can use our wrist stretch as an example. We'll put our arms out in front of us. And when we flip our palms, our fingers to face down, we're almost flexing those fingers back. That's going to be an example of flexion. Extension is when we bring the fingers all the way up to the sky, to the ceiling. So flexion, pointing the fingers down, extension, pointing the fingers up. We can also find a little example of that with our arms out to a T position. Imagining flexing your muscles, bringing the forearms inward. That's going to be our flexion of the elbow. And on extension is when we extend the arms really out long away from us. So flexion here, extension here. Tadasana is an example of our flexion. Extension example would be our reverse plank or reverse table, an example of the extension of the shoulders. Another example with the flexion extension is of our feet. So whenever we have our feet, a lot of the times we're instructed to either point or flex your feet. That's also a good way to stretch out those ankles. When we're flexing our feet, we're finding dorsiflexion. So flexing your toes back towards the shin, shortening that distance. Whenever we're pointing our toe, we're finding plantar flexion. So finding dorsiflexion, flexing the foot, finding flexion. Finding extension by the plantar flexion as we point, finding that extension. And a lot of the times in yoga, sometimes in dance, we find this little mix of the two, of the pointing and flexing, the extension and the flexion of the foot. So usually we call this position flex, this position point. A little spot in the middle, like I like to call it, is flointing, where we're pointing through the arch of the foot, but we're flexing those toes back towards us. That also helps spreading the toes wide as well. So that's our floint, that's our flexing. That's our flexion and extension. Next one we're going to go over is adduction and abduction. This is moving away from the midline and back closer to the midline. Moving away is called abduction. Moving closer to the midline is called adduction. So an example of that abduction and adduction is bringing our hands to the stop sign hands. Gluing our fingers together would be abduction. No. Yes. Gluing our fingers together will be adduction. Spreading them apart, abduction. Adduction as we lower the space between the fingers, and abduction as we spread them wide. Same can be for our toes, bringing them together for our adduction, spreading them wide for our abduction. Other examples of that ab and adduction in our yoga poses are warrior two pose. So in our warrior two, our legs are abducted. Our legs are abducted as well as our arms, abducted in a warrior two. If we're moving into our Garudasana, our eagle pose, our legs and our arms are really close to that midline, so that's going to be the example of adduction. Last thing we'll go over today is our synergist and antagonist. So when we're in poses, one side of the muscle is going to be really doing all the work. The other side is going to take a little bit of more break, a little bit of relaxation. Synergist is the power muscle. The antagonist is the opposite one, the one that will relax on the other side. For example, when doing curls, it's a good example of those synergist and antagonist muscles changing as the arm formation changes. So as we curl the biceps in, the biceps are what's going to be our synergist, the power. Triceps are going to relax at this point. But then when we straighten our arm, the triceps start to turn on and the biceps will relax. Another example of that synergist and antagonist motion is in our forward fold, our paschimottanasana. So finding yourself with your legs stretched out forward, hips planted on the ground. Take a deep breath in, and then exhale, folding forward here. When we keep our toes engaged, it keeps the top parts of our legs active here. The kneecaps are lifted. The kneecaps are in flexion. Our quadriceps are lifted, hugging more in towards the midline. So quads are going to be the synergist here, doing the active motion. And the hamstrings are the antagonist, getting that passive stretch. Some examples in our forward fold here. Our spine is in flexion. Our scapula, our shoulders are abducting, going away from the midline. Our shoulders, arms overhead, are in flexion and adduction. Our elbows are in extension as our arms are straight. Our hips are in flexion and adduction as we're folded forward. Our knees are in extension because our kneecaps are lifted. And our ankles are in dorsiflexion, flexing the toes. Those are the muscles that are being our synergists. The ones that are our antagonists, the muscles that are relaxing during this pose, are the upper limbs, the rhomboids, traps, the lower traps, the lats, and there's passive length in the stretch of passive length in hamstrings and glutes. Stress at the joints or the point of attachment here indicate that tendons or connective tissue are being too stretched out and being stressed out. So the goal is to find that sensation along the whole length of the muscle and not just in those joints or tendon area. A lot of people have trouble even bringing their legs forward in that paschimottanasana, and you might see a lot of turned out or externally rotated hips and knees. So those people might have to find slight internal rotation just so they can get their hips to be neutral. So we're not externally or internally rotating the hips. They're at neutral for that paschimottanasana. If you tend to have a tight back or glutes, that's when we might find that external rotation. So we just need to use a little bit of internal rotation to get those hips back to neutral. So when you're practicing in your own practice, maybe find some of those words, the rotation, the horizontal plane, our sagittal plane, that axial plane in your twist. flexion and extension of your arms, legs, wrists, and ankles. Finding some abduction and adduction, and then finding which muscles are going to be active, are synergists, and which muscles are relaxed during a pose, that are the antagonists. All of the information provided to you today in this class comes from this Yoga Anatomy book, Leslie Kaminoff and Amy Matthews, as well as information from my 300-hour yoga teacher training with Angelica Govert, which is also known as Yoga Liberate. Please feel free to reach out if you're interested in any other trainings. Make sure we're educating ourselves. If you're a yoga teacher, read through those books. Like I suggested, this Yoga Anatomy, whatever your training provides, a couple of other books, Light on Yoga and The Heart of Yoga. We'll go over a little bit more anatomical structures to help you throughout your practice. Please be sure to subscribe and like and share all of my videos, and stay tuned for some more. Thank you. Namaste.